recorded live.
Hello, everybody. This is William Hayashi coming to you from Chicago. Welcome to Genesis Science Fiction Radio, a service of the BlackScienceFiction.com website. And this is, I don't even have my clock up. This is the July 19th, 2013 edition, and our special guest is Bill Campbell, hailing from, are you in D.C. right now, Bill?
Yeah, I'm in D.C.
Okay. And Bill Campbell is a multiple publishing threat. He has done numerous things, which we'll get to in a little while. But let's start out with the early stuff, Bill. Where did you grow up?
I'm from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. My mom is from a small mining town outside of Pittsburgh, which is so small it doesn't even have a single stoplight. And then my dad's from Kingston, and I was born in Pittsburgh, so Kingston, Jamaica, that is. So.
Yes. And how long did you stay there?
Until I was 18. You know, as soon as I graduated from high school, I got out.
Mhm.
Yeah. It was like Logan's Run. I just kept my head down and just kept running.
Okay. Well, I mean, was it an easy childhood? I mean, what made you want to flush out of there as quickly as possible, or were you just kind of adventuresome and wanted to strike out on your own?
Well, it's yeah. I'm trying to think of I would say that it was not the most enjoyable experience that one can have. Growing up where I grew up, but So I mean, I just pretty much wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, and I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now I go back on holidays.
Yeah. Okay, and so I take it that parts of your family or much of your family still lives there.
Yeah. My mom and aunt and uncle, they still live there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we go back, a couple times a year. In fact, I was just there last weekend.
Cool. Now, when you left out of there, I mean, let's talk a little bit about what you do. You seem like a fairly prolific writer. You've been a music critic. You publish your own stuff.
Right.
And did any of that, being a writer, manifest itself, early on in life, or was that something you picked up a little later?
Well, it's funny. Actually, it was way too early for me to have actually decided it. My mom used to be in charge of making industrial films for Westinghouse. So think about like movies for like circuit breakers and nuclear weapons.
Nice dichotomy.
Oh, hey, the American corporate giants. So one time, my mom was very much into exposing me to all kinds of different things growing up.
Sure.
So one time, because she used to have to go out to Hollywood a lot to make these industrial films. So
right.
When I was about 9, this is like 1980, she took me out there, and we spent like 2 weeks in the middle of the school year out there in L.A., and 1 week was hanging out in this movie studio, And so 9 years old, I got to go to like the Brown Derby, and Lee Majors was there. I mean, it was all that stuff, and the one woman that she worked with lived in Hollywood Hills, so I went to like this big adult party in Hollywood Hills, and I came back and I was like, and this is how messed up I've always gotten things skewed, right? So I go out to Hollywood and I get the Hollywood bug, and I don't want to be an actor, I don't want to be a director, I wanted to be a writer. I don't know why I made that connection, because that doesn't even seem to make sense, and in a lot of ways it still doesn't. But
well, the power is there. I mean, seriously, without writers, Hollywood, television, I mean, all of that doesn't exist. I mean,
yeah, I know, but they're like the least respected of the whole creative class. I mean, which is probably, I mean, that's why I like writing novels, because the novel, I'm king. Not like I really want to rule anything, but I'm king. But you do like a playwright, or you're doing movies. I mean, the writer. I mean, the script that you write never appears on film. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
that's true.
They need you, but they don't like you. They don't respect you. You know, so.
Well, I mean, the coin of the realm in Hollywood, which is something that people don't realize if they don't have much experience, is not money, it's not stardom, it's not fame, but it's ego. I mean, just flat out ego is the coin of the realm.
Right.
And, you know, whoever can count coup over anybody else, that's going to be the top dog in whatever situation. And you're right, writers are not very well respected. And you get directors, you get producers, you get studio executives, you get all these people who take that entire industry, and then they feel that they can do so much better than anybody else at making something award-winning or whatever. And we find out that these people are bankrupt of creativity and any kind of substance. But it's kind of cool that at the age of, what'd you say, 9?
Yeah, I was 9.
At the age of 9, I mean, you actually determined the font of what it is, you know, that drives Hollywood, the creative part that drives Hollywood. So, I mean, that's kind of cool. So when you figured that out, did you start writing right away, or what did you do?
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I mean, I can remember one of the first things I did was, one of the first things I did was I really tried to write a TV comedy script for Kim Fields.
Okay.
Remember Tootie?
Yeah, well, what did she say to you when you brought this to her?
No, I didn't. No,
I know, man. I'm poking you.
Yeah, I had lunch with it.
Kim, I got this thing I want you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, was it like a full-on script, or what was it?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, I did like my little 20-minute thing, and you're 9. So, you know, it was all whoever, I mean, who did I have a crush on? I mean, like, at that time, well, okay, let me think. At that time, it probably would have been like Kim Fields, Valerie Bertinelli, and like Rita Moreno was probably one.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that was my thing, was just trying to write those scripts. And then, I mean, yeah, but I was 9, so, you know, those things didn't really last that long. And I drew a lot too. Like, that was my thing. Like, writing and drawing and reading were, other than playing sports.
Did you ever put any of that together? Like, create your own storybook or a comic or something like that, or did you kind of keep them separate because you hadn't melded that all together yet?
Well, I tried, but that's a little later. Like when I was 12. And one of the things that my mom did, you know, is. Like, she always, I mean, it's not like we had much money or anything, but, you know, she always nurtured whatever kind of curiosity I had. So, you know, like, you know, she bought me, like, a little electronics set when I was however old I was, like maybe 10, because I always found that fascinating. And then I drew a lot. So at one point, I think it was like maybe 13 or so, the Art Institute of Pittsburgh had these Saturday morning classes for teenagers.
Sure.
So I did that, and then that's when I stopped drawing for real, because, boy, those kids were so much more talented than me. But I did fall in with a comic book group. Like, there were like 4 of us. And we were all into comic books. And so I started trying to write comic books then, too, but, yeah, I don't know. Nothing really. I did one program in Pittsburgh for inner city youth, and we did put together a comic book once, but that was pretty much it. Like, I've always wanted to be in write comic books, but I never really pursued it as much as I pursued the novel.
Yeah, and so that, I mean, it sounds more like you dabbled in your, you know, especially in your elementary school life. Did anything change, like when you got to high school?
No, I mean, I didn't dabble with writing. Like, I knew I was going to be a writer at that point.
Right.
I would dabble in other things.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, you know, because, like, you know, growing up in Pittsburgh in the 70s, so, like, we all played sports. So all year round you played sports, right? Baseball, football, basketball, whatever. But always it was pretty much about writing. So it was a lot of reading, too. So that was pretty much what I was really kind of concentrating on at that point in my life, which is, you know, way too early to concentrate on anything. But
Sure.
that was pretty much. And then the other things were just dabbling, I would say.
What kind of stuff did you read? What were you drawn to?
Well, I had like this weird jump, like, you know, what, kindergarten you start learning to read. First and second grade I read, like, you know, those little Danny and the Dinosaur, Frog and Toad are friends. And then, like, in third grade I jumped to just, like, commercial novels. I mean, I don't know why. So, you know, and at that time, you know, it was like fourth grade maybe. So I would just read, you know, whatever was in, you know, whatever the Walmart equivalent was at those days, or the grocery store. So I was reading like horrible action, you know, thrillers and stuff like that. You know, that's pretty much what I was reading. Then at some point I fell in love with S.E. Hinton, which would probably have been about fourth grade.
I have to ask you, I mean, were you a sci-fi reader that early, or was that something that did you even gravitate to that later on? How did that all, or did that happen?
Not in my youth, no. That didn't happen until adulthood. Yeah. No, I was very much, for the comic book thing, I mean, I did go into a Stephen King phase, but I never really thought that I was going to be a horror writer.
Mhm.
Like, I really thought that my pretensions were more, quote, end quote, literary, I guess you can say. And it wasn't until I was introduced to Octavia Butler and Samuel R. Delany, and that was later, that I realized that all the different literary concerns that I had could best be exercised in science fiction. Because I'm a polyglot nerd, right? So I read all kinds of different things, and I'm interested in all kinds of different things like history and you know, sociology and psychology and all that stuff. And science fiction is like the one genre that allows you the distance and space to say things that you want to say. You know what I mean? And to explore things that you want to explore. You can't do it as much in, you know, more mainstream literature as you can in science fiction.
Well, science fiction allows you to speculate on things that are the possible, and not the you know, if you're going to write some historical fiction, but you want to kind of keep to, you know, the real historical narrative, you know, you're limited in how you can do that. But with science fiction, I mean, we've got people who have taken, you know, gone 3,000 years in the future to put together a society and a creative universe, and obviously that gives you the, you know, almost total freedom.
Yes. So, but that's I mean, that's much later. I mean, the high school and stuff, I mean, I was pretty much trying to figure out how to write the great American novel, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and somehow I just don't see Jane Eyre by Bill Campbell or something like that. I mean, what were you looking at in terms of structure or the genre, or was it just this nebulous great American novel that you were shooting for?
Well, you know, I mean, this is my early 20s, right? So I mean, I didn't really, or you know, in my teens, I mean, there wasn't really much to emulate. I mean, because it's like, okay, so like when you're like 12 or 11 or whatever, and I'm like in love with S.E. Hinton, and like I'm like reading The Outsiders, so I'm trying to, but you know, none of them are black or anything. So
sure,
like I mean, I remember writing these things that would absolutely just be laughable if I still had them. Of, you know, like, you know, black gangs like The Outsiders and stuff, you know, like.
Okay.
You know, meanwhile, right, like, you're in the south side of Chicago, right, like, you know, where, you know, the Blackstone Rangers are turning into the El Rucas. It resembled nothing like that. You know, it was more like.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because I grew up with them. I grew up with a lot of those guys, and, you know, I see what you're talking about, you know, when you want to put something together that's speculative or fictional. I keep thinking back to a book that was kind of influenced me, which was The Spook Who Sat by the Door. which was set in the South Side, mostly Hyde Park, where I grew up. And to read something about my neighborhood was kind of like a revelation for me.
Right.
Because, I came to writing late. I didn't even think about writing anything fictional until, I don't know, maybe the 90s, and never finished. But I do understand where you're going with that. Let me ask you this. Where did you end up? I mean, when you left Pittsburgh, did you head out to school? What did you do then?
Yeah, I went to Northwestern. So
here in the Chicago area.
Well, Evanston, yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah, Evanston, yeah.
Yeah, which is a suburb north of Chicago. How were your Chicago days?
How was my what?
How were your days in Chicago?
Oh, I love Chicago. I mean, yeah, I always said that if you could move Chicago to where Atlanta is, like, it'd just be the perfect city. But, like, for me, it was just a matter of the weather, like, because, you've been in Northwestern, it's right there on the lake, and, winter comes, and you're just, like, you can't even cry because your tear ducts are frozen.
or you walk out the door and you can't inhale because your lungs go, don't be bringing that stuff in here.
Yeah, I know, and, like, all the mucus in your nose freezes. And
yeah.
And then I spent 2 summers there, and one summer it was, like, cold as I couldn't believe. It was like I don't think he's ever got, like, above 55 one summer. And then the other summer I spent there, it was just amazingly hot. And I was like, you know what? I can't be miserable all year. Like, I can't. But, man, I used to love Chicago so much. And, like, I was just there last year for my 20th college reunion. I was just like, man, I just miss this place so much. But
I do enjoy the city. I mean, there's a lot to do here. It's a lot of people who come here for school end up staying. But I'm telling you, as I get older, I am less and less enchanted with the weather.
Yeah, because Pittsburgh in the 70s, I mean, the winters were horrible. Then I go to Chicago, and the winters were horrible. And then I spent a winter in Eastern Europe, and I was just like, you know what? And over there, at that time, I mean, they never shoveled their sidewalks or anything. So, like, not only is it bitterly cold, but you're, like, slipping and sliding and falling all over the place. I was just like, so as soon as I got back to America, I moved to Atlanta. I was like, I'm done. I can't take this no more. You win.
Yeah. Now, when you got to Chicago, I mean, when you got to Northwestern, did the writing bug at all hit you once you got here?
Oh, I mean, I never really stopped.
Okay.
But I never really, like, I'm not very prolific as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not, and this sounds bad because, it goes against most of the writing advice that you ever get. But, I'm not one of those people that has to write 1,000 words a day, or I have to sit down from 6 to 7 in the morning and write. My thing is pretty much like all the different books that I had. I mean, the 3 novels that I had, and just all those things. I mean, those are like the end result of my thinking about them all the time for like years.
Sure.
So like Sunshine Patriots, my first novel, when I wrote it, that was based on a short story I'd written 7 years earlier.
Okay.
Then my booty novel, I had that idea about 5 years before I actually wrote it down. And then Koontown, that was about 2 years of just constantly thinking about it. And then when I sit down and write them, that's usually about a 6-week process.
That's not bad. I mean, that's essentially kind of how I do my novels, too. I do the... all the time, apparently my subconscious is thinking about the story, thinking, and then I turn out a 500-page novel in, anywhere from 5 to 9 months.
Right.
I mean, so I do understand the process, yeah.
Yeah, for me, like, when it comes to art, it's like whatever's clever, whatever thing that you find fits for you. But, like, as far as, like, always having stuff out or putting a lot of stuff out, like, that's never really been that big of a concern to me.
Right.
My biggest concern was I used to make like this comparison to like, you know, not like I'm as talented as Prince, but like I always wanted to, like, you never knew what you were going to get, but you knew you were going to get a Prince album, you know, back in his prime.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of the way that I feel about myself, is just like I really want like a Bill Campbell novel. Like I want you to sit there and go like, well, that was written by Bill Campbell. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
Other people don't write that. But as far as the subjects go, you know, it's who's ever, you know, there are hundreds of people living in my head, and it's whoever's voices are strongest at that time when I can carve out the time to write is what ends up being made into book form.
Sure, and it's good that you never got treated for that condition because
well, they tried. Don't think they didn't try. And then I had to sit there and think about it. I was like, well, you know, I kind of like these voices. You know, keep
sure.
company. You know, when I'm drunk, you might not like them, but you know, while I'm sober, everything's fine.
Well, let's talk about the first thing that you published. Tell us a little bit about that.
My first novel, or just
your first novel. Well, no, let's talk about the first thing that you published ever. I mean, let's take a look at your career, the beginning of your career.
Okay, well, let me think now. So, I would say it was about 1990 or so that I was introduced to science fiction. It was a woman, of course.
Sure.
She's like, you know, oh, you got to read them, Octavia Butler and Samuel R. Delaney. So, like, I think I read Wild Seed first, and I was like, wow, okay, so this is cool. Black folks do this, and they can do that. And then I picked up something by Delaney, a couple things, and I was just like, holy, you know, like, wow, this intellect is just insane, and now I know that you can do whatever you want to in this genre, which you can't necessarily do, as I said before, in more mainstream literature. So it was like the Gulf War. I remember I wrote my first real short story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a royal mess, but I wrote it. And then, like, from then on, I just started writing short stories like nobody's business, and I just like try. And you know, I would just sit there and I would write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And at that time, I was pretty much writing a lot. And I think it was like 92 when I published my first short story. Can't remember the name of it, but I remember and you know, I got rid of all that stuff ages ago.
Sure.
But I remember it was about a convict who'd been given like 70 consecutive life terms, and he was so stubborn that he outlived his 70 consecutive life terms. And in that long life that he had, like that 300-year life he had, his prison writings became a religion.
Okay.
And so basically it was like his great-great-great-great-grandson picks him up from prison, and all he wanted to do was just to be free for one day. And so he's like, he goes to a park and he dies.
Right. Okay.
Because he was like, he got to be free. He like stuck it to the man. He lived out his 70 life terms, and he got free. And you know, so it was all about his, you know, his religious writings and his conversion and his one moment of freedom, and then he died. That was the first short story I ever sold, and it was just in a little zine. But yeah, that was about 92 or something like that. And
how do you feel about that? I mean, was that kind of a breakthrough moment, or was it something that you kind of expected? You know, did you go ahead?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, you see yourself in print for the first time, and it's pretty cool. The cool thing was like for me was at that moment was because by the time it was published, I was living in Eastern Europe, so my dad mailed it to me. So that was kind of the cool thing there, was just like these people who knew me but didn't know that I was, you know, had a thought in my head, really. You know? Where suddenly reading the story, we're like, oh, wow, okay, I totally misjudged you. So that was kind of cool. But then I had another short story published when I got back, and then something really weird happened. I started getting, like, way ahead of myself as far as short stories go. Like, I kept having, like, these really complex ideas and turning them into short stories and not really having the talent to turn those short stories into full-fleshed ideas.
To execute them well?
Well, like you read Borges, right? And he can have, like, a 3-page short story. It feels like you read a novel.
Sure.
And like I think that's what I was trying to pull off, but yeah, I was no Borges. I was like 24. Trying to pull off something that I just couldn't really pull them off. I just have like all these really compact things going on in just the really short form, and it just did not work. And I just kept getting rejected to the point where I just stopped writing short fiction. And I still don't write short fiction to this day.
That just kind of knocked it out of your park, huh?
Yeah, I
mean, it is hard. I'll be very honest with you. I rarely, I'm fortunate enough to have a short story in the upcoming issue of Genesis, but, excuse me, to be honest with you, I'm like you. It's much harder to execute a short story well, where it feels full, where it has a great beginning, middle, and end, where it comes up with an ironic ending, because I like ironic endings a lot.
Uh-huh.
But it takes some talent to be able to do that. That's like another talent I don't have is, people go, oh, why don't you do screenplays about your books and get them made into movies? And I'm going, I don't have the skill to take a whole novel and break it down in sufficient quality so that it would be a creditable screenplay. So, I do shorts and stuff like that.
Yeah, screenplays are a completely different animal.
Yeah.
It's just, there are different skill sets needed for different forms of writing. I think a lot of people who aren't writers don't necessarily understand that.
Mm-hmm.
That, you could be a great novelist and be an absolutely abysmal screenwriter, and you could maybe never be a journalist, And you can have Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists who try to write novels, and they just can't do it. It's just...
Yeah.
They're very specific things that you need for those kind. And my problem with screenplays is that they're so specific and they're so precise. Like this has to happen on this page and this has to happen on that page. And the way I write, and the way that I think, I'm just not that regimented.
Yeah.
Personally. You know what I mean?
Yes. When you made the transition from I've had it with short stories, I've had enough rejection, or whatever it was that drove you, did you immediately start working on novels or longer format stories?
No.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. What I did was I had a zine. So I started the zine, I think it was like 96 or so.
Mm-hmm.
At first it was called Louverture because I like coming up with clever titles that won't sell a thing.
Okay.
And then I'm very good. My Booty Novel, Koontown Killing Kaper. I know how to have a messed up title that everybody just runs away from. So yes, I named my first zine after Toussaint Louverture, and people were like, "What?" So then it ended up being Contraband.
Okay.
Because I liked the double meaning, and then that way I could have my little black nationalist, meaning there, and people not get it. So that's kind of But anyway, so I had a zine. It was basically political essays, short stories, poetry, and stuff. It was like very politics. And I did that for a while, and then I did a little music trade magazine.
Well, wait, before you jump ahead, what was the response to it? Was it really abysmal, or I mean, did people get it after a short time and kind of get into it? What happened?
Oh no, I mean the zine did all right. You know, I got some pretty good distribution, especially after I renamed it Contraband. It was a lot easier.
Sure.
I got distribution, and I kept upping the quality and stuff, and so it did okay. I mean, and that was the '90s and the desktop publishing thing, and there were a lot of zines, and there were still a lot of bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was just like anything else in this mega capitalist society. I mean, if you're doing things small and you don't really have that much money, there's only so far that you're going to go, unless you get like really lucky. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the adage that it takes money to make money, unless you have something that trips somebody's trigger. The equivalent today, I guess, is like a YouTube video going viral.
Right.
The luck of that. Obviously, we didn't have those kinds of channels of distribution back in the '90s, so it was just that much harder.
Well, I mean, and the thing for the zine was, I mean, you get to a point where, well, I mean, like for us, I mean, like Bitch ended up doing well. I mean, like Bitch was like like one of those zines that ended up really doing well, but like we didn't have that same kind of appeal because ours was so scattershot. Because I mean, it was like poetry and short fiction, and and it was sort of like it was very multicultural, but in a leftist sense, not in a liberal sense.
Sure.
Like, it was very leftist. So you get to a point where you kind of have to, like, you don't have the money to really expand. And because of the nature of our zine, there really weren't that many advertising opportunities.
Right.
Because it's like smash the state, buy Coca-Cola. I mean,
right. Yes.
It didn't really. So it didn't really.
It didn't resonate with the advertisers or the companies.
Well, there was only so many places that could advertise in it, but then you don't really have the numbers either. So I mean, it was just a very weird spot to be in, because you're just like, okay, we're doing well, distributors are liking us, we're getting good reviews, more people are submitting, more people are coming in and subscribing, but at the same time, it's not like you get enough subscriptions every month to like pay for printing.
Right.
And
sure.
pay to mail it out and all that stuff. So, yeah, it just got to a point where you just kind of have to, I just had to fold.
And it was a far more expensive model back then. I mean, electronic publishing today, or publishing across the internet, is far more cost effective. It's easier to do. Blah blah blah. When you have the infrastructure of having to deal with hard copy, that's a pretty expensive proposition, and even more so today.
Yes. Yeah, it's hard to deal with either way. It was
right.
hard to deal with. But I mean, I didn't mind so much. I mean, it was fun. I mean, like, yeah, you get to do very silly things when money's not the concern. But then ultimately, money is the concern.
well, it is.
Because it wasn't like, I'm not like a trust fund baby. It was like working and your money goes into the zine. So. But it was fun. It was definitely an experience.
Well, now let's talk about that, because a lot of people who set out to do a publication, who set out to aggregate other people's writings and things like that, it seems like the creative part is not really the hard part that they have to deal with. A lot of them really get hung up on the part where they have to do the business of doing business.
Yes.
And how did you manage that? I mean, where does that fit in with what you ended up having to do? I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty straight head on your shoulders and figured out, well, this is not making enough money to be sustainable. Time to move on. I mean, did you go completely broke before you made that realization, or do you think that you were kind of on top of the business sense of doing business, and and had a good head on your shoulders for the overall process?
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to those sort of things, they're just. It just seems like there comes a point, right, where, because as you said, the creative part is easy, especially when you're asking for calls for submissions and stuff.
Sure.
But as the word gets out, that becomes easier and easier, because more and more people submit more, and just from the numbers, you start finding like real treasures and people who can really write. So that's the easy part. I mean, the hard part, which is truer now than even then, is it's hard to get the word out on anything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, it's sort of like, because now because I just started the whole independent publishing company thing. And you're just like, people are inundated time and time again. I mean, just every minute of your life almost in America, you're bumping into an ad.
They're trying to get something in front of your eyes. I mean, advertisers now talk about getting something in front of your eyes for a second or a millisecond.
Yes. So that was the problem then, and it's the problem now, even though it's easier to get something in front of people's eyes now. But at the same time, that just means there's more things in front of people's eyes. So people don't realize, for that, I mean, because, I always laugh when I listen to the radio and they'll go like, oh, this novel was completely word of mouth, right? And then I do the math because, I'm on the other side of that. Like, I know a lot of, what it takes and, I know how much the table at Barnes & Noble used to cost. And, I used to know, and I was just like, that word of mouth campaign cost, 5-6 figures. It wasn't a word of mouth campaign because they had to make sure that if somebody actually talked about it, you saw it again. And, when you're a zine or you're an independent publisher or an independent author, you don't have that money to put it in front of people's eyes 7 times before they even contemplate buying it. So for the zine, it just kind of got to that point where it's like, well, we're building, but at the same time, you have to keep spending more to build more, and then you'll get more money, but that money never covers, because I couldn't get any ads. If it had been like a music thing, it would have been a lot easier, but it was a politics thing, and it was a lefty politics thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. You're just kind of like, wow, and I'm spending, every minute of my day doing this, So
and you can't build a business chasing your money. Chasing it. You can't build a business chasing it because you can't say, well, I'm not successful this month, but next month we'll take care of what happened this month, and the next month, and the next month, and the next month.
Well, I mean, I think that in the beginning of any business venture, it's like that. It's a matter of, well, am I going to end up bankrupt? I mean, that's kind of like where you have to go with that kind of thing. Like, either you go bankrupt or you sit there and go like, well, am I getting enough positivity back that I should go another month? But it all depends on what you're trying to make too. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, it makes absolute sense.
Because anytime you start a business, you're going to be failing until you succeed. So that's true. That's the draw. I mean, it's like going to Vegas, right? I mean, it's like you keep losing money, but you know that you can win. And I don't know if there's any business that has ever started in the history of capitalism that was not losing money when it started.
Well, unless you get, even if you get venture capital, people think, oh, well, I got venture capital, so, I wasn't losing money. No, but you owed money.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand, or they don't think in those terms.
Well, you owe more than your money. You owe more than money when you deal with those folks.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. So you did the zine, and then it kind of, tapered off, and then you jumped into something else? What happened?
I did a zine, then I did a music trade magazine, and then I that one did tank.
Yeah.
Well, it was just a matter of starting something with little money. Like, I think,
right.
And then also, which it probably would have tanked anyway because, like, it tanked in 2000, and, you know, right after that, the music biz took, like, a huge hit, so it probably would have tanked. And then, you know, as far as having a trade magazine goes, I mean, most of your trade went to record stores. You know,
right, and the whole economy, yeah, that's true. The whole economy changed.
Yeah, and the whole model changed. So it probably would have tanked anyway. I just started with too little money. Because actually, like, by the third, is like you were talking about chasing your money. By the fourth issue, I'd already had money coming in to pay for that, but by that time I was already so far in the hole that I just couldn't, I couldn't carry it on.
Yeah, it wasn't sustainable.
Right, but I mean, if I'd started off with, say, like $10,000 more, it would have gone on a lot longer. But then, yet again, the whole model changed, so I don't even know what the hell music trade could have done in 2001, because Napster by that time just really had them reeling, you know.
It did, but, subsequent studies by Harvard showed that Napster actually increased album sales, because what Napster did that no other medium other than radio could do was allow people to listen to something before they purchased.
Yeah.
You don't always get that, and Napster actually contributed to a bump in album sales.
Yeah, for Amazon.
Well, for whomever.
Yeah.
But by saying, but by doing so, it's still, you have an entire industry that has not caught up with technology yet. I mean, they're still suing their customers.
Oh yeah, no, the music. Well, they had a model where they had things on lock, and that was the funny thing about having because my music trade magazine focused on independent stuff, so I had to do radio charts and stuff. And
right.
they went on a war. I mean, the record industry was, for them, I mean, they did a great job, right, in building this monopoly, because, they went after FM radio, they had that locked down, and then by 2000, they were going after college radio. And, like, all of a sudden, you see, like, college radio charts that were looking like top 40 charts all across the country. So then, Napster came along, and then all this other stuff came along, and this industry that they had on lock busted out. And
yeah, they didn't have control anymore.
And they still haven't been able to figure that out. And I think, and the way that they reacted in retrospect, well, actually not in retrospect, because there were people telling them at that time, like, y'all really need to just embrace this because you can be on top of this. But the way that the majors acted was pretty much counter to the way that they should have acted. And, in a lot of ways, I mean, it's the little guys who paid for it worse.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's just the way it is. And, you see the same thing going on with publishing now. Like, these major publishers are trying to act like the major record labels did. And you're like, didn't you learn? It's like, no, we have to charge $15 for a PDF, of a book, and you're like, no, you're going the completely wrong route. But
well, there's going to be, I mean, the battle for publishing is actually going to come down to two behemoths, and you've got Amazon on one side, and you have Google on the other side. Right now Google owns the desktop, but Amazon owns online purchasing. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two shake out, and how let's be honest, how the industry gets divided. Excuse me, the majors, you got 5 or 6 majors here in publishing companies in America.
Right.
Right now they've gone and they've scooped up, or they're in the process of scooping up all of the self-publishing outlets.
Yes.
And, they're throwing a lot of money at it because so many people have bypassed them.
Yep.
A lot of people have bypassed them, and they want to get that back somehow. So major business, big business does what they do. What are you going to do, you know?
Oh, figure it out.
And then that whole word of mouth thing. I mean, that's the biggest lie in the universe. I mean, it was word of mouth, but it costs about $200,000 for that word of mouth thing to work. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tell people about that all the time. I was like, it's like when Borders still existed and still Barnes and Noble now. I was like, well, that table where all those books are just laying out willy-nilly, that costs a lot of money to get on that table.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes, it does.
And you're like, I mean, they make it look, like, oh, these are just books that we threw out there. And, then you realize, or like, your book is facing instead of that. I mean, there's some stores that weren't even allowed the employees weren't even allowed to pick their employee picks.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of stuff, but whatever.
Well, in terms
of
marketing, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. What were you going to ask?
In terms of marketing and placement, I mean, it's like Coke and Pepsi at the grocery store. I mean, it's exactly the same model.
Well, what I discovered was like from personal experience, because my first book, Sunshine Patriots, the Borders. When I was doing the book tour there, the Borders in San Diego, like it was right by where Comic-Con is, right? So the manager wanted to bring me out there to San Diego for the Comic-Con thing, right? So I went out there because I was doing the tour, so I just arranged the mini tour around that, and so I go out there, right? And I sit there during Comic-Con for my book signing, and it was an absolute flop because I couldn't get, because newspapers don't cover independent published authors and all that stuff,
right.
So nobody knew anything about it, right? But what she did before I got there, like just a few days before that, she put my book on the front table. She sold like 18 copies of the book in like 4 days. Right?
Wow.
This is like nobody knows what in the world Sunshine Patriots is. Nobody knows who I am. It was just that table. Like
placement.
That's how powerful that table is. So on paper, I sold like 20 books for my book signing. I looked like a genius. But in all honesty, it was just because of that table, and she put that book there, and people saw it and like, that sounds interesting. That's how powerful that table is. That's why it costs so much money.
And you know what? People buy just because it's on that table.
Yes.
They figure, if it's on the table, I've got to have it. And there's a beauty of marketing in that.
Well, I mean, I think what the table was, or it was just sort of like there's so many books around, and you don't necessarily know what you're looking for necessarily or whatever. But if while you're walking down that aisle or whatever, catchy cover, I mean, you're just going to browse. You're just going to browse. And a lot of times you're not going to end up with the book that you walked in the store to get just because, that looks interesting. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not so much that people want what's on that table. It's just that table is there in a place where people are, we're socialized to browse a bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like that table was genius because, I mean, you're walking around, you're meandering, and all of a sudden, what's this? So it's and that was the beauty of that table. And like just to see it firsthand, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. What'd you think of that? Did you get to Comic-Con while you were there? And was that your first one?
No, I didn't. No, I mean, you've done book tours, right?
No, nobody knows me. I mean, as far as, even on this website, I've, they've been kind enough to have an ad there, and I still have my doubts if anybody thinks I know how to write yet. But that's going to change. No, it'll change. It'll change. Hopefully before I die. I don't want all of these posthumous accolades for anything I've written. But I have done some local things here in Chicago.
Oh no, this was totally. I mean, my tour it wasn't. I mean, I'm independent, so it wasn't.
Yeah,
it was.
Sure.
It was me bugging folks. And anyway, so like for me, I've been for like tours and stuff. Like I've been to San Diego 3 times, and I don't think I've spent a total of like 7 hours there. So
wow.
like that I flew in there, did the thing, drove to the borders, did the thing, and got in the car to go to L.A. because, well, my aunt lives there, and, like, I think the next day I had to be in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I didn't see Comic-Con. I didn't see a thing. And that's been my story with when I've done tours. That's pretty much been the story of every place I've been. It's like I've never, like, had the time to look around.
Did you have an event in Vegas, or were you?
I had an event in Vegas. Yes, I cobbled together an event at a community center in Vegas for that. Yeah, I think that's what I ended up doing, like 3 events, and then I think it was
you know, we've got content creators who check out this show. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you do increase your visibility in a time when, as we both know, so many people are competing for milliseconds. You know, a study was done that came out about 6-7 years ago that showed that it only takes 3/5 of a second when someone lands on a website for their subconscious to decide if they're going to stay or not. So there's a huge battle for getting eyeballs and being able to see something. What is it that you do to kind of help your visibility from a marketing perspective?
Well, you know, I've had 4 books, but 3 novels in like 9 years. And what I tell people is just like, and in each, so one was 2004, one was 2007. Let's see, yeah, Sunshine Patriots was 2004. My Booty Novel was 2007, and Koontown was last year. And in each 3 cases, like, things were just totally different, like, each time, right?
Okay.
So for, like, Sunshine Patriots, I was trying to do, you know, the more established book tour. And at that time, like, Barnes & Noble, Borders wouldn't touch me, so there were still independent bookstores, so I was doing these things in independent bookstores, right? And it was just a lot of convincing. And then in 2007, you know, it was like an extinction tale, right? So all the independent bookstores, they didn't want to touch anything. Yeah, so I ended up doing this tour of all Barnes & Nobles. And I was just like, this is just utterly bizarre. Like, I did so many Barnes & Nobles that, like, my Booty Novel ended up being modeled by them. And so so they ended up actually carrying it because I did so many Barnes & Noble events.
Right.
Right. And then Koontown, because it's Koontown, and you've seen the cover, and for people who don't know, it's the old black-faced coon with a bullet hole and blood dripping down the forehead. No bookstores wanted to touch it. In fact, it was really funny because I was about to do 2 Barnes & Nobles here in the D.C. area, and the regional boss for Barnes & Noble emailed all the stores and said, you will not have Bill Campbell at any of our stores. So I got canceled, yes, because they were like, so I ended up doing only 1 Barnes & Noble, that one. But the thing that I found for Koontown was because, I was trying all kinds of different things because first I didn't want it to be a physical book. I just wanted it to be an e-book.
Right.
But because, you know, it's like, oh, this thing is called Koontown Killing Kaper, it's KKK, you see this, you know, this blackface with the bullet and the blood, and, you know, I have a Scotch-Irish name, so nobody knew that I was black, and, like, people were just terrified. So, like, I was trying to build some online presence, right? We have T-shirts, we have underwear. There's an original soundtrack to Koontown Killing Kaper done by a bunch of D.C. rappers, and nobody would touch the thing with a 10-foot pole. And I'm like, this is an anti-racism satire, people. Come on. Like, you need to read this. This is relevant, you know? But nobody would touch it. So what I ended up doing through, like, different iterations was, for this one, I mean, I went all, what was that, Elin Harris, and, you know, how he used to, like, sell it in the back of his car and go to, like, barbershops and stuff and hair salons. Well, I didn't do that. because I mean, as soon as I'd walk into a barbershop with that cover, people would probably beat me down. So but what I ended up doing for this one was, like, I was doing, like, craft markets and book festivals and music festivals. And, I ended up doing, like, 50 events for Koontown. And so, like, what I discovered for me personally with Koontown, and the weird thing was, like, because of all my different activities of just constantly being out there, and I haven't sold that many. It's not like I'm some verging on a bestseller. But
Sure.
What happened with Koontown, which is very interesting, was last year when it came out, it ended up being taught in 2 different universities because, some professors heard about it and they read it and they liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then this year is going to be taught in 2 more. And then last year, so I was end up, while I'm doing craft fairs, I went to like 2 universities to lecture about this book that the kids had to read.
Sure.
So that was so it's like this weird dichotomy. But what I found was just by going out to all those different places, that's what really helped.
And being seen.
Being seen, because I think with like, especially now because there's so many things on the internet and so many people want to market on the internet, and,
right?
But it's not anything. It's not a commitment, right? So people are like, "Oh yeah, man, I saw your thing and I retweeted it." Like I wrote this manifesto for Koontown, like why I wrote Koontown. It's on
right.
It's on Koontown.com. You can read it, right? So when I came out with that, that thing went. It didn't go viral. I say it went bacterial. So,
people were taking something to kill it?
Yeah. But you can't kill the bacteria. You just have to wait it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, so I come out with this thing, and, like, and there are all kinds of people on Black Twitter who retweeted it, and people were, like, reposting it on Facebook and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, like, in, like, a week, like, 700-800 people read the thing. People are like, oh, we need to support this guy. Oh, this book sounds great. Y'all need to buy that book. 700, 800 people, right?
Wow.
That. You know how many books I sold because of that?
I have no idea how many.
1.
Yeah. I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah, 1. One person out of all the hundreds of people said, like, we need to buy this book. 1 person bought it. And I love him to this day.
Well, part of the problem is, as much as they're going to love you, it's still a relatively small segment that does read books these days. That's the other tough hill to climb. It's not just the content you create, but there's a much smaller market.
That's true. It's like when I remember one time watching what was that, Capote. And there's a scene in Capote where he's giving a book, a talk on his book, and it's like it's a theater full of people, and you're like, oh my God, because that wasn't that uncommon for a writer of his stature to actually talk to like thousands of people because he was on a book tour, But you get very few writers who could do that now, if any. So you're just like, wow, it used to be that deep.
I've just taken to annoying people on the bus, as we're going someplace.
Well, it's Chicago. You can do that. You should sell them a pair of socks while you're at it. Like,
and some incense. Yes.
Buy this pair of socks and get the book for free.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. I'm just saying. It might work for you, man. But no, so then just being out there and all that stuff, like, because you never know when you're out there who you're going to run into, and you don't know who's going to pick stuff up. And then ultimately with people seeing that you're out there so much, kind of makes them a little bit more sympathetic. But just doing the whole online thing, for me, it probably does work for other authors. I don't know. I don't write anything that I haven't written anything that was really all that general.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
More niche stuff. Yeah, hang on a second. You're listening to Genesis Science Fiction Radio, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the July 19th, 2013 edition, and our special guest is Bill Campbell, author, blogger, all-around troublemaker in writing. Troublemaker in writing, yeah.
But yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
No, so I don't really write anything that general. So, like, it's not like I'm, like a Danielle Steele or something, that I'm writing something that where anybody would necessarily feel like they could pick that up. I mean, like, Sunshine Patriots is like this experimental anti-war novel, science fiction. I mean, I came up with my own language in it. Like, I mean, so these are my own dialect in it. So, like, and then in 2004, remember, most of the country was still pretty pro-Iraq war, so, like, I was going around, like, and that was, like, during my tour. Remember when all those people were getting beheaded and they were showing it on the nightly news?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that was when my book tour was.
Yeah, somehow it doesn't seem like a good shoehorn fit there.
It was just horrible. It was just like, because I mean, they were still pretty gung ho about the war. I mean, the general public was. So I was just like, so that just was horrible. And then my booty novel was more appealing to that, because men and women both liked it, and it was pretty much over 30, because I mean it's basically a nerdy love story, a black nerdy love story.
Yeah.
So a lot more people were into that. But even still, just calling it my booty novel just made people like, oh, because because with the Barnes and Noble, I was mostly doing suburbs. So most of the people I sold to were middle-aged white women. Which,
yes. Nothing wrong with them because they actually still read as a demographic.
Hey, I have nothing against anybody, in general, especially when it comes to, stuff like that. So, that was my main audience for that, just because that was the only place I could get to, because, the big stores in the city were like, can you sell 50 books at your book signing? And you're like, if I bought them all, If I bought 43 of them, so they didn't want me, so the suburban ones did. And then, Koontown is definitely like, as I said, I mean, it's a satire. It's like, it's like Boondocks and Chappelle Show, but totally inappropriate for television.
Sure.
So, that one wasn't going to be like, and on the Today Show, we have Bill Campbell and Koontown Killing Kaper.
Exactly. Hey, but tell people a little bit about what Booty Novel is about.
Well, after I did Sunshine Patriots and, was trying to sell an anti-war novel while Americans were being beheaded in Iraq, I was just like, I need to just switch up for a minute and not think about anything. So at the time, I think I wrote it in 2005. It was the whole chicklet thing, and then there was all these like Terry McMillan knockoffs. Remember all those?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And the thing that annoyed me about, chicklet annoyed me. I read books for a living, by the way. I work for the Library of Congress. We produce audio books for the blind, so. I read for a living.
Okay.
So, we were getting all these chicklet books, and, I'm reading them all, and, like, the thing that annoyed me about those were they just thought they were much more clever than they were, and I was just like, I know all kinds of people, and nobody lives this kind of life, so I didn't like those. And then, like, the black equivalent, those Terry McMillan knockoffs, you're just like, nobody lives like this. Like, this is just not possible. Like, it was really bugging me because, I went to NU and I know some, very successful black people, and I'm like, they weren't CFOs of multi-billion-dollar companies at the age of 23. But these stories would always be like that. And you're just like, this just makes no sense. I was just like, so you know what? I just want to write a book about black love about middle-class black folk. Just like, just people living. you know?
Right.
So that's what I did. That's it. You know, it's, what is he? He's like 32-year-old writer. Yeah, the guy's name is Damian Cross. He's a 32-year-old writer. He comes back from his first book tour, which is an absolute failure because he was trying to sell an anti-war science fiction novel while people were being beheaded in Iraq.
It's autobiographical. I see.
That part is.
I'm poking you, man.
Yeah. No. There's a lot of. You would have to know me, but there are a lot of. I make a lot of fun of myself in that book.
Okay.
And when he gets back, his fiancée, he's been with for 7 years, dumps him. Right. So he has to write another novel, and he has to be single for the first time. And everybody's like, Damien, you need to write a booty novel, you know, and make some money, and he refuses. Right? But this is all his blog about writing another novel and trying to date. So, like, while he's refusing to write a booty novel, he's basically writing a booty novel. You know, so that's you know, it's a meta, you know, it's a meta novel about, you know, that kind of stuff.
What's the reception to it have been so far? I mean, have you gotten any pub on it?
My booty novel? Well, that's the old one. That's the 2007 one. Oh, that one was, that one was, it got me at a fancy New York agent.
Okay.
But they didn't like it.
Did they ask you to rewrite it, or did they just say it's not something we want to do?
You know, at the time, Ladlit got slammed, and so here's this black guy writing about guys.
Yeah.
So they were like, this is Black Ladlit, and, you know, these aren't black people we recognize. This isn't, like, ghetto. You know, so because of what I didn't know at that time was that the whole ghetto lit thing was about to take off. You know, so the fact that I was writing about middle-class black people, they're like, not so much. You know.
Well, I'm like you. I took issue with that, too. I mean, there were so many books out there about the so-called, and I'm doing the air quotes thing around this phrase, the black experience. And I just resented the hell out of the fact, well, let's go back to one of the memes that pissed me off. When white people got so upset that Bill Cosby had the nerve to create a TV show where a black lawyer and a black doctor got married, had a big-ass house, and all their kids had white problems. You know, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up
Hyde Park,
in the Hyde Park neighborhood, and there's nothing but those kinds of blacks in that neighborhood. You know, my pediatrician was black. My banker was black. You know, and you know, I had Asians. I had, you know, Jewish people, English people. I mean, there were people on my block. We had 38 townhouses on my block. And I think we had something like 63 kids, and out of the 63 kids, we had, you know, probably a dozen different ethnic groups and people from, and so, but that doesn't exist. You know, those kind of black people don't exist in the American meme, in the American cultural meme. So,
you know, I wrote.
I'm sorry?
You need to read Koontown. That's what Koontown's all about.
Well, no. I admit that, and you know, and also, you know, you have look at Hollywood Shuffle. You know, the movie Hollywood Shuffle. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, it just annoyed the hell out of me because after all of that time reading all of these books, you know, I read science fiction. I guess black folks aren't intended to be around in the future because there's none of us in any of the movies, this, that, or the other thing. And so, you know, my frustration was, well, if I'm going to write something, I want to write something that's true to my life and put it out there in a way that's kind of a de facto existence in this speculative universe that doesn't sound that damn speculative. So, well, I mean, I understand exactly what drove you.
Well, so, I mean, the funny thing was we were just talking about my wife and I were just talking about the Cosby Show earlier this evening, and I was like, well, the funny thing is, well, I mean, because it is, you know, it's the construct, it's the social construct as opposed to social reality, and it was sort of like, so, you know, black people like the Cosby family did exist, but the social construct says that they couldn't exist, and the funny thing is, like, because it wasn't just white folks who were complaining about it. There were black folks complaining about how the Cosby Show wasn't.
Yeah, but I don't listen to them. What do they know?
Yeah, but the funny thing was, right? Like, you never hear white people like in the '80s going like, "Man, Dynasty just does not represent, represent white culture." And,
or even the Partridge Family. None of that stuff.
Right. And it's not. And it's not supposed to. One, but that's why it's called verisimilitude as opposed to reality. But that's a whole other issue.
Right.
But it's just one of those things that's really funny because and that's why I wrote Koontown, right? So that's the big thing with Koontown was like, okay, so we have these social memes, these mediated realities that say that black folks are living this way, right? But then if you look at the stats, you realize that black people are actually kind of not living that way. There are black people who live this way, but most of us aren't. It's sort of like, I was listening to this report on NPR and how they redid the Moynihan report, 50 years later, right? And, they're like, well, while there have been some gains in the black community, let's talk about the poor people, right? And I was sitting there going like, well, one of the little gains that we did was that the black middle class is 5 times larger now than it was when the Moynihan report was written.
When it started, yeah, exactly.
That's not minor. That's not some gains. That is a bunch of people, in the face of racism and discrimination and all kinds of, bullshit being thrown on them, have really done really well for themselves or are doing well or doing a lot better than they really ever have any business of doing. So, to me, what I was saying one of the things that I thought about is, if you change the gaze, as opposed to how we are being portrayed as to how we're living, the black experience of the last 50 years is like an American success story. There's still problems. There's still grave problems. I'm not going to downplay that. But if you look at where people were 50 years ago, and you look to see what the black community is now, in a lot of ways we should be like, wow, we did that. But instead, they're always like, well, as I was talking about with you before before we going on the air, they talk about how bad Chicago is. But 20 years ago, the murder rate was almost 3 times larger than it is today. That's a victory.
We were losing 100 people a month.
Right.
100 people a month, yeah.
This is a victory. But no,
yes.
we keep portraying black people as lesser than. No matter which way you look at whatever kind of stats that they want to point at you, they always want to point it to black folks are lesser than. So that's why I wrote Koontown Killing Kaper, because I was like, okay, if black folks are really acting the way that you say that we act, this is what
the deal is.
This is what it would look like. Because
exactly.
we keep having these, because I was sitting there going I listened to this other report, right? So it was what was it? 80% of the fiction books published for, by, and about African Americans at the time of this report, which was about 2010, 80% of the books were ghetto lit, right?
Right.
For African Americans, right? Meanwhile, less than 30% of African Americans live in majority minority neighborhoods, ghetto or otherwise. So you're 2.5 times more likely to be portrayed as living into this crime-ridden ghetto than you are of actually living it. So I was just like, this is all propaganda. So let me just take the gaze and turn it on the propaganda. That's why, if you want the summation of Koontown Killing Kaper, it's basically all the rappers in Koontown are being killed, and everybody thinks there's vampire crack babies doing the killing. So it's up to ex-supermodel.
See, now this needs to be made a movie, dude.
Yeah, but it's up to ex-supermodel, ex-homicide detective, private eye, Genevieve Noir to save the day. So that's
okay.
Yeah, that's what Koontown is. So I take all of these different portrayals that are portrayed as reality to the American public. Because, to me, I was sort of one of the things I said in one of the lectures that I gave, I was like, George Zimmerman did not think that, he didn't just come up whole cloth thinking that Trayvon was dangerous. He's been socialized, and all of us have been socialized to think that somebody who looks like Trayvon is dangerous. It doesn't matter
you're right. It doesn't matter what color you are.
But it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter the actual stats of how most of these black boys are living. We are all socialized. And, you know, I'm 43, and it's been going on way before I was alive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I dealt with it, well, you know, up until very recently. And, you know, I mean, it's been going on, you know, basically since, like, the Haitian Revolution. They're like, oh, my God, one day, you know, they can kill us.
Yeah.
You know, so that was...
I'm sorry. There's a really good small section in Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 about how this country has been indoctrinated into believing, you know, exactly what you put in your book. All of those memes, all of that, the ridiculousness there, and it is a media-driven animal. I mean, almost completely, because, as you said, if you look at the stats, if you look at the demographics, if you look at the census, if you look at, and this is not to say that there are not problems. I mean, the problems are legion. I mean, they're legion. The fact that, you know, the NRA thought Stand and Deliver was a great thing to sell guns, and we can shoot black folks with impunity. Two benefits in one. Yeah. So, you know, what you have there is a meme that it's not even satire. What it is it sounds, and I apologize for not having read it, but I'm not very literate. But
that's a horrible thing for a writer to be.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? I think just reading other people's stuff just messes me up, because if I like what they like, then I'll probably write what they've written. Anyway, but I mean, you've got this entire culture out there that has put so much faith and so much. I mean, it's like a religious fervor in how they study their television, or their favorite talking head, or their favorite cable channel, and nobody, I don't know if they lack the strength, the time, the ability, the challenge. You know, I don't know what it is, why people have decided, other than the ubiquity of the dumbing down of America, I don't know why people have decided I can't think for myself anymore. So I'm just going to let my damn TV do my thinking for me. Well, and then we come up with you having to write what you wrote.
But I mean, I don't really necessarily blame people's laziness for these kinds of things, because it is socialization. I mean, these are images like those advertisements that are constantly in your face.
Yep.
So it's not a matter of, I'm going to, you know, because it was like the report I told you about, right? It was, you know, this was NPR, right? Oh, Bleeding Heart Liberal.
Sure.
They decided we're going to talk about the negativity.
Right.
And you'll see that. So, like, no matter where you will go for that, for this kind of information, you know, other than, you know, I'm going to read the new Jim Crow or something like that, or I'm going to read Freakonomics or something like that, outside of, like, very few books, everywhere you go, you're going to be inundated with that image.
With the same message.
And it's the same thing with, you know, I mean, it was like when I was growing up, you know, the whole Palestinian Arab terrorist thing was taking off, especially in the 80s, right?
Right.
So when I went to Eastern Europe, most of my friends were Muslim, either African or from Asia Minor or whatever. And I was just sitting there going, like, you know, we would all talk and be like, oh, you know, like the Africans would be like, oh, you know, you're supposed to hate us. And then I'd be sitting there going, like, wow, you know, these Muslims that I'm hanging out with, a lot of them from states that my passport says I can't travel to.
Exactly.
You know, they were like, you know, some of the nicest, most Christian people I've ever met. And I'd be like, you have no clue, like, what I thought, like, even because I'm black, I'm like, you know, I always thought those stereotypes about you were bullshit, but at the same time, they're still in my head. You know, and it's not until, like, I'm living with you guys that I realize, like, wow, this is just crazy. But most of us don't have that experience, and most of us can't have that kind of experience where you drop out of life for a year and you know, meet people. So,
you know,
I don't really blame anybody for having these kinds of things other than the people who put them in your head. And that goes from, the rapper talking about how much weight he's carrying, how much weight he's moving, and
right.
And how many people he's killed when he's never lived that life, to news reports that talk about like the education gap when the education gap isn't necessarily racial but class. We don't talk about it's like this affirmative action debate, and then I really want to talk about mothership since that's my next thing. But it's like affirmative action, right?
Right.
So historically speaking, the biggest benefactors of affirmative action have been white women, and right now for the last 10 years it's been white men, right? And then we have like these affirmative actions with rural kids as opposed to urban and suburban kids. But as a nation, we're talking about getting rid of affirmative action, not for those people, not for the white people, but for the blacks and Latinos.
Right.
As a nation, that's the debate. Though the statistics show that affirmative action didn't really level the playing field, it more reinforced white privilege than it did erode it. But we don't talk about that. So like everywhere you turn, just as part of the national debate is the national imagery, this is what we're dealing with. And how do you combat that necessarily, other than writing a satire, because I'm only one person?
Yeah, but and that's the problem, and how many people will reach your satire, or how many, that's tough. And the thing is
well, there are college kids in rural Wisconsin and rural Virginia who have had to read it.
That is perfect, because at least at that age you can start a dialogue that has some chance of sustaining itself in the psyche of somebody. When they're exposed to something. Yeah. I
thought the interesting thing about those two classes, because it was in rural Virginia and rural Wisconsin, was those kids got it.
Yeah.
Like they like more than their professors did. Like those kids like just got it. I was really surprised. I was just like, wow, really? Like they had insights on like that a lot of people, like older adults, didn't get, because they've been less indoctrinated by the whole thing.
Right.
So there are all kinds of stats that you can throw at people about how black folks are really living, and nobody will believe you, because that's just the way that we've been trained, and that's the way that we are constantly trained, and nobody really wants to talk about that part.
Well, you've got this huge corporate mass media marketing campaign that reinforces the cultural stereotypes, and it sometimes I just despair of trying to get around that, and not get around it in a way like expose people to new ideas, but Richard Nixon started the war on the intelligentsia back in the early 70s because the anti-war movement was born of the college and high school campuses across the country. Mm-hmm. So, from then on, it's been, a government goal to foster the ubiquity of the dumbing down of America. I've mentioned this before in another show, but I took my ACT and my SAT exams in 1972, and up until about 2008, it was 2008 when the last time we did any work on that, they've revised downward the scoring indexes for the SAT and the ACT 18 times between 72 and 2008. So people who get my scores these days are at least compared to me back then, are morons, all right? And there's a reason for that, And then you have another stupid meme out there that, especially in this city, Rahm Emanuel, our mayor, says, well, the key to the education crisis in Chicago is keeping the kids in school for an extra hour and a half. I'm thinking, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense to me. What you're saying is you're going to keep these kids in a bad learning environment for an extra hour, and that's going to somehow, be the magic bullet to improve things.
Well, if you take poison, sometimes the cure is more poison, right?
Well, that's true.
No,
but you're absolutely right. And what do they go? Oh, well, the treatment was a success, but the patient died.
Right.
Exactly. And
burn the village in order to save it. You get the idea.
Absolutely. So the fact that you've gotten your books in a very impressionable stage, kids are reading this at a very impressionable stage, is nothing but a good thing, because you look at these adults now, they've been trained, you have this whole Newt Gingrich from the 90s thing where if you're not with us, you're against us, and if you're against us, you deserve to die, or terrible things should happen, or whatever.
Right.
So you have this stratification of our society based upon artificial boundaries, artificial ideologies, because nobody's pure anything. Nobody's a pure socialist. Nobody's a pure whatever a Republican is, or whatever a Democrat is, or a progressive is, or a conservative or a regressive. So you've got these titles floating out there that people think that they have to live up to, and they grab onto them with the kind of fervor that you see a drowning person grabbing a life preserver, and they don't even know that what they've really grabbed is a brick that's bringing them down. So I see good things in the fact that you can get your work in with students, because only the young have been changing memes. I mean, we wouldn't have had the movement on marriage equality that we did had it not been for the fact that 20-somethings don't care about somebody's sexual orientation. So
hey, you wouldn't have had Obama. I mean, honestly.
Well, that's true. That's true. And that also is indicative of the fact that you do have this 18% of the white population that's still pissed that the South lost the Civil War. Okay, and those people have been given license to just act a fool because we have a half black president. So a lot of that stuff is just never that far below the surface. But again, they're being bred out. The preponderance of them are old white guys, and these guys are dying off.
I think that's part of the reason why it's so virulent and so fervent now, is because not only did Obama's election was like a paradigm shift. Well, it was just like the song. I mean, because I'm 43. I never thought there was going to be a black president. Not until until he won the Iowa caucus, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, he might actually win. I thought, and none of them thought that. So not only was it just a paradigm shift in that they saw that, oh my goodness, this is a changing America, but also, when they looked at the stats, they realized that not only is it a changing America, but they might not have a voice if this change continues.
Well, they're scared they're going to lose their white privilege. They're going to lose that white privilege.
So you have those things like these crazy abortion laws being passed, and you have the Supreme Court basically, giving the middle finger to the 15th Amendment and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. You have these because they realize this is their last shot to make America the America that they've always envisioned, which has always been a construct, right? I mean, it's like looking at Leave It to Beaver and thinking that shit was real. So, that's just the way it is. Can we talk about Mothership now?
Yeah, please do. Tell everybody about it. And be sure to tell them how I missed my opportunity because I was busy doing my thing.
Well, I didn't know I did not know what you were doing. We have not met.
No.
I don't know why you missed that chance.
All right. We'll talk later off the air, and you can chastise me enough. But seriously, tell everybody how the whole project got started.
Well, it was one of those odd things. I mean, you sort of touched on it earlier about why you write science fiction when you're just like, oh my God, where are we?
Yeah.
And as I said, it was like one of these nights. It was just because last year from about May until November, I did like 50 events with Koontown. So I promised myself that, for the next few months I was going to relax, but I didn't. But I never really relaxed. So what happened was it was like December, and I was binge watching some shows. So I was watching Walking Dead, and that one kind of the first season annoyed me because I was like, how in the world are they in Atlanta and there are no black people? I mean, it's like these zombies just love dark meat. I mean, it's just like, what is going on here? I mean, I know that they've gotten better about it over the years, but, you know, so that one upset me. And then, like, you know, the end of Battlestar Galactica, right? So I'm watching Battlestar Galactica. And at the very end, you know, the little kid with the Asian mom and the white dad is supposed to be Mitochondrial Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, you know, genetically speaking, that kid could never have been Mitochondrial Eve because that means like half the people who are around today never could have existed.
Exactly.
Because he was like, you know, because aside from the straight hair, she's all, you know, recessive genes as far as, you know, so I'm like, you know, I'm not saying that they had to be, you know, Negroid, you know, but I mean they should have been Tamil or like, you know, Polynesian or, you know, something along those lines with dark skin and dark, you know, straight hair. That's what that character should have been. That's what those parents should have been, you know. And I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, they just constantly write us out of our own stories.
Well,
so,
I mean, a quick aside. I mean, look how many people think Jesus was white.
Yeah, but you know, you can have your God, and you can have your God in your own image. That's I'm an atheist. I don't really care about that.
No, but I was speaking genetically. Not,
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I see why, you know, people want their God in their own image. So then I was sitting there thinking, you know, I had this thought that I put up there on the mothership site was that, you know, when you look up at, because I was outside at night, I was like, you know, when you look up at the night sky, space is as black as far as the eye can see, but then, you know, when they put it in movies or in books or whatever, it's white beyond all comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, you know, and meanwhile, you know, because even though I'm only sometimes a science fiction writer, I've been paying attention to, you know, there are a lot of people of color, which is a term that I don't like either, but that's like a whole other issue, who are writing, and who are writing well, who are writing speculative fiction, you know? So I was just like, dude, you know, I can sit up there and I can tweet about it or blog about it or whatever, or I can just come out with a book. So, you know, since that's, you know, I'm more action-oriented in that sense. So I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to come out with an anthology. So I called an old friend of mine, Edward Austin Hall, who is my co-editor, and I said, hey, man, I just want to do this book. And so he was down, and then I talked to a new friend of mine, John Jennings. I don't know if you know his work.
No, I'm not familiar.
You should check him out.
I will.
He did the cover. So if you go on Mothership Connect or if you go to our Indiegogo campaign, you can see a little bit of his work. And so they were down. So I was just, I sat up there and contacted as many writers as I possibly could find. Personally, I contacted you, if you remember.
Yes,
and
I do.
I was like, hey, you know, we came up with this. We want to do this anthology, Mothership, Tales from Afrofuturism and Beyond, and what we wanted to do was, it was open to anybody, but we really wanted the main characters to be people of color. So
sure.
It's sort of like a reverse Hollywood treatment, because in Hollywood, you can be whatever you want. You just have to tell stories about white people.
Right.
So we figured,
exactly.
Why not do the opposite? You know, just like, you can be whatever you want, just write about some colored folks. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was basically the idea, and people were really receptive. We got really, really lucky. I don't know. I guess folks was thirsty. You know, so we got like all kinds of really good authors. You know, Victor Laval, Juno Diaz, S.P. Sumtow, Tobias Bukel, N.K. Jemison, you know, Lauren Bucas. There's just so the anthology in and of itself is Charles R. Saunders, you know, Nisi Shaw. There's just a lot of, you know, incredible authors who came aboard. You know.
And when do you think you mentioned you just had a rough draft that you put together?
We sent out the uncorrected proof this week to a bunch of newspapers, websites, and stuff. Because,
Sure.
they're not, like the major publications usually don't cover independent authors, but I did not know what their policies are about independent publishers, especially when it comes to anthologies.
Right.
But, like Juno won the Pulitzer, Victor has won the American Book Award, what was it? Linda Addison, she won the Bram Stoker.
Mm-hmm.
Sumtal, he's won Nebulas and Hugos. I mean, we have award-winning authors in this, so we're hoping that that the mainstream media will be a little bit more receptive to this.
Sure.
Than they normally are. But we're running an Indiegogo campaign right now.
I just put up the link to Mothership Connect in the chat room for people to check out. Yeah. And for let me get this out of the way. For people who are looking for more information on you, more of your work, you've got at least 3 good websites here. There's Koontown, KOONTOWN.com, no www. And for this anthology project, and I assume there's a link to the Indiegogo campaign on the website. It's MothershipConnect, all one word, .com. Again, no www. And tell us a little bit about your Blogspot site, which is Misanthrope.
Yeah, I kind of gave up on the blogging thing.
All right, forget what I just said, everybody, about that one, because he's, as you've heard, he's kind of given up on that. Well, but I mean, you've got some pretty cool, awesome stuff that is coming out, though. Yeah, well, I mean, we're really excited about Mothership. I mean, I think I often joke that we punched above our weight class on this one. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, people were, and I think that it's multicultural in the way that I envision multiculturalism, as opposed to the way it's actually practiced. Right. Because I mean, we weren't sitting up there going like, "Oh, we need to have 5 Native Americans," or we weren't doing that. It was really just these are we have 40 stories in this anthology, right? Wow. And that's pretty good. Yeah. Well, we could have. I mean, we really could have done 50 or broken it up into 25-story volumes, but it's best to leave people wanting more than leaving them exhausted, right? But so it was 40, and it was really hard. But we really just. I mean, it was real, and we have established veterans, and. We even have Greg Tate and one of my personal heroes, Darius James, who wrote Negrophobia. If you ever read that, you should. Right after you read Koontown, read Negrophobia. And we have some beginners. We have a couple authors. This is their first story. Sure. And it's incredibly varied, and we're enjoying it so far, and we think that we've been very lucky. So. Oh, I can't wait to see it. If you would do us a favor on the site here, I asked this of everybody who's here. When you 2 things. When you have appearances where you're going to actually show up someplace, if you would put it on the events calendar at the BSFS site, so that people who are looking for something to do on a weekend might go, oh, well, look, Bill's going to be over here. I have the ankle bracelet off my ankle, and the sheriff's letting me leave the house. Let's go check him out. Yeah, you'll have to check. It might not. I might not be somebody you can hang around. Then I'm not sure. Yeah, but then and then also give us a heads up when the book is going to be in its final form and published, so October that we can 18th. Get. I'm sorry. October 18th. October 18th. That's my birthday. That's my daughter's birthday. Well, there you go. Well, we'll have to do something special. I'll catch up with you later on that one. Yeah. So October, but still put it on the events calendar so that people can look it up, and there are certain writers that when I have time, I wonder when their next thing is coming out, and you go to websites and you can't find that kind of information. If you put it up there for us, we can we can kind of keep track of the progress when it's coming out and things like that. Will hopefully drive some sales too.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, so we've got about 20 more minutes. Let's talk about what you think is going to happen for you over the next 5 or 10 years. What kinds of things are you looking at that you haven't achieved yet that you would want to put some effort into, and you know, what's driving that particular that effort?
Well, excuse me. Well, for Mothership, I started my own publishing company.
Right.
And
well, tell everybody that. I mean, what do you accept for?
Well, right now,
for publication. What kind of clients are you looking for? Go ahead.
Right now, just because I'm just starting out, I mean, Mothership has been a 24/7 operation like since December.
Sure.
So probably until the beginning of the year, I'm not really looking for anything at the moment. But basically, and that's not to dissuade people. It's just a matter of, I mean, this is all-consuming. I mean, especially since, you know, like I feel like I really have to go all out because so many people, you know, went with the idea,
sure,
like pretty quickly. You know, I mean, you know, it's like people like Thumbtaw and Juno and Tobias and Minister Faust too. You know, I mean, they just got the email, saw the idea, and they were like, "Here, use this." And we're like, "Whoa, wait, what?" You know, like, seriously? Like, no convincing? You know, I mean, people like, so I'm going all out for this. Like, I will be touring. As I said, we're doing the Indiegogo thing to support the writers, so we're just trying to, you know, give them money before, you know, give them, you know, money that they deserve.
Right.
And then I'm going to be out there on the road everywhere I can possibly be. I mean, I might even be going over to England and trying to, you know, do stuff over there. But the next 5 years or so. So I started the publishing company, and one of the things that really inspired me to do it was one, my own frustration, right? So you know, one of these weird things was that, you know, I'm selling books out of, you know, basically the back of my trunk because these big time publishers are saying that I'm unmarketable, right?
Right.
And then at the same time, you know, there are college professors who are teaching my books, you know. And then just like last week, I picked up this Blacks in Science Fiction book. I forget the guy's name who wrote it, but you know, I just wanted to read up on it, and my name's in it, you know. And I'm like, whoa, that's me. And I'm sitting there like, and I'm like, how the hell does this guy even know who I am? You know,
right.
you know. And I'm sitting there going like, wait a second, so I'm good enough for academia, but I'm not good enough to be in your bookstore. And then I was sitting there thinking like, I can't be the only writer out there that's going through this. You know, like it's not possible. And then I was at the Baltimore Book Festival, and I'm sitting next to this author, and we exchanged books, and like I read his book, and I was like, my goodness, this is incredible. And he was telling me how, you know, he went through several publishers, and none of them would pull the trigger. Like he worked with like 2 or 3 different publishers for months at a time, and they wanted to publish the book, but by the time it was you know, time to pull the trigger, none of them did it because it was a religious satire, and they didn't think it was marketable. So basically, like the idea behind this book, this company is one, I want to do graphic novels because I still have that comic book itch.
Sure.
And I really want probably mostly genre, but things that are really just kind of not marketable. You know what I mean?
Or not conventionally marketable. More like.
It's just that because to me, art and commerce have always had a really weird relationship. But the thing is that so much in our popular culture, because these are run by corporations, I mean, the art is lost in the arts.
Yes.
You know, as far as the popular thing goes, because they really just concentrate on the commerce. And the thing is, like, the problem with the whole corporatized art thing is, like, corporations and art run on 2 totally contradictory models. right? Because, you know, the art depends on the new, the innovative, the thing that pushes the boundaries, and corporations depend on existing models, right? So, you know, we are driven by artists who aren't like the artists that we've seen before, where, you know, somebody at a book publishing, record label, whatever, wants to know who exactly this person sounds like, you know, because then we'll know how to market them. So, like, those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for, is, like, books and graphic novel ideas and works that are really well executed, really good, and just kind of off. Because in that way, we're trying to build something as opposed to trying to necessarily, like, I don't plan to ever be rich or to get rich off of this idea.
Right.
It's more along the lines of trying to push culture back into the mainstream. Because it's like, I mean, think about this, right? Like, we used to have, like, the William S. Burroughs and the Henry Millers and, you know, like, people who would, like, get on TV or, you know, write books or, you know, whatever and say, hey, man, you're full of shit. Like, our culture needs to change. But we don't have that. I mean, like, you think of, like, this last, like, since 2001, we've had, like, some of the most turbulent times America's ever had. Yeah, our popular culture, like, does not reflect that. You know.
Well, no, our entire culture has been homogenized to the point where it has no flavor, it has no taste, it has no zip, it has no visual appeal. It's almost like, you know, what they try to do with kids these days in elementary school. They try to homogenize them with drugs so that they're all the same. It's all the same. There are very few people taking chances. There are very few people who are doing innovative things. That's why, I think back to, like, do you remember when the big hoopla around the Blair Witch Project?
Oh, yeah.
Because they shot the whole thing. It was so new. It was so innovative. And then they decide, well, let's corporatize it and do Cloverfield. You know, it's only after they see that some money can be made from something that they think they're so innovative, they're so edgy, they're so whatever, because they went and they did this thing that wasn't a generational model that had existed for that long. So
right.
My hat's off to you for doing this, and I really hope that you manage to pull out some pretty unusual talent. And you know what? It's going to happen. Look what happened with the Twilight Zone. Look what happened with the Outer Limits. Look what happened with and I'm not talking about the modern Outer Limits, which was pretty sanitized, but those things were supremely innovative, and then they garnered the kind of popularity they got because they were different. I think more so than anything else.
Yeah,
it was something that you didn't see it anyplace else.
Yeah, it's like watching All in the Family and realizing that the three major networks would never show that again.
Exactly.
Exactly. It was too honest. They're like, no, we can't do that. People will be offended. But I mean,
well, one of my favorite shows from earlier was The Prisoner. You could never get The Prisoner on TV because, first of all, the executives aren't going to understand it, and if they can't understand it, they're not going to air it, you know?
Right. No, so that was sort of the thing, because I was just like, like Koontown, right? I mean, it was sort of like, well, somebody needs to say it. Like, I didn't want to. Like, I held on to that for, like, 2 years. But then I was sitting there going, like, wait a second now. I'm, like, sitting up here, watching some rapper talking about, like, smoking people like it's the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going into this bookstore, and I'm seeing all these covers, and I'm not seeing, like, I'm not seeing things that I can relate to, and I'm seeing all these ghetto covers. And, like, where I was living at the time, in this posh white suburb we were renting, and, like, the black books are all ghetto lit. And I'm like, wait a second, I know that how is this possible when we have more college-educated and more, educated black people in general? Our books less educated. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, so finally I was just like, somebody has to say it. And I guess it'll be me, I mean, because I'm waiting for somebody because I don't want to say it because I know everybody's going to look at me like I'm crazy. But then I was just like, oh, maybe I am crazy, and somebody's got to say it, so I'll say it. I'll say that y'all are full of shit. And I'll lose my agent, and, and I'll just go on my own, because somebody had to say it. And, fortunately, there still aren't that many people who have read it, but most of the people who have read it, if they can stomach it, have found value in it. And I mean, I think as I said, I'm selling it out of the trunk of my car, and by the end of next school year, will have been taught in 4 universities.
Yeah, that's great.
So imagine if it had been published by a larger publisher, then we would be having this discussion. We would be having a more honest discussion about why Trayvon was shot. We would.
Yeah.
And why they didn't want to prosecute it. We would be having more honest conversations about stuff like that. Because that book would be out there. But, now, it's just fate. I don't, you do what, I didn't sign up for this to have an easy road. But, yeah, so those are the kinds of things. I'm not looking for Koontowns to be publishing. I just want people with different perspectives, things that can that's what mothership is, right? I mean, it's just it's just a paradigm shift to let you know that there are all these people out there writing this stuff, and some of them are, a lot of them are very accomplished writers, and yet you still don't even know that they exist. So I wanted to say, hey, look, here's this book. They do exist. Stop ghettoizing them, because they only represent just one facet of all the people who are out there, Because, I contacted over 200 we contacted over 200 writers, but, it's a book, there are limits to what you can publish.
Now, do you think this is going to be a one-shot for you, or do you think that you might serialize Mothership?
Well, when I was talking to Ed, my co-editor, I was just like, yeah, we could probably do this once every 5 years. Yeah. Well, because, you don't want to...
Oh, no. If you do it every year, you kind of...
it's not special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus,
sooner or later, it'll be Jaws 3.
Yeah, and you have to take the time to take a look around and see what the good stuff is.
Yeah, and also, I think that when you come out, it's more of a nurturing thing than depleting, right? It's now we published everybody. It's 5 years, so we published everybody. But this way, people know that hopefully it'll provide a little bit more space for a lot of other writers. The ones in the anthology, the ones out, gives everybody a bit more exposure. And then 5 years from now, we can see where everybody is.
Right.
And we can do it again. That's the way that I envisioned it. But I do have we do have other anthologies that we want to put out with different themes.
Sure.
And just to shake things up.
Mix it up and shake it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what I see.
Okay. Frankly, I can't wait for you to, take off like to be the next big thing, And for people who are looking for you, take a look at mothershipconnect.com and Koontown.com with a K, KOONTOWN.com. If you want to check out Bill, how much feedback do you get? Do you get much feedback by email or whatever about your the stuff you've done? What have you heard from other people about Koontown?
Well, I kind of looked at that as Koontown is sort of like that coworker you always wanted to sleep with, but were kind of ashamed to admit that one day you do, but you don't really want to tell everybody what kind of good time you had.
You're a very disturbed brother. Okay, that's all I got to say. You are, you remind me of the late great Patrice O'Neal with that kind of thing. But I believe me, I do.
So,
I understand exactly what you're talking about, though.
So I've gotten a lot of like, oh man, that was really cool, man. You and to certain, I mean, there have been some people who really could not finish it, especially if they're older, like, because I think it just brings up too much stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, I'm trying not to think about that.
Yeah, I don't really want to go there right now.
Yeah, exactly. But so I get a lot of like, oh, this is great, and there have been a few people who've actually written about it publicly, but usually it's sort of like, hey man, I really liked your book, and then they like run off.
I liked your book, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, basically, because I'm like, hey man, why don't you just tell all your friends? They're like, yeah, no, it's okay. I just wanted you to know.
Yeah. So what'd you do with your copy? Did you hand it off to somebody else? Well, not so much.
Yeah, even though there was one white guy. He told me that because he reads all the time. So when he reads, he leaves to start discussions. He leaves the book that he's reading like on his desk, like all day to start discussions. He's like, and he did that for like a week for Koontown, and like nobody wanted to talk to him.
Well, there you go.
Which is, I mean, I got a lot of that when I've been out publicly too. I mean, it's like people are so put off and most people don't want to ask.
Well,
and that's what I find kind of interesting was because if you asked, you probably, I mean, when most people ask, I mean, they find that it's not, what they, but if you look at the cover. People have a hard time looking away from from the cover, so they're like, "Oh my God!" Like and they'll walk by and they'll be like just riveted. But a lot of people are just like really afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Because once they ask, then they're like, "Oh, whoa!" Then this sounds really interesting,
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's what happened when I was just trying to do the ebook thing. Was like people were just too afraid to ask, so nobody really wanted to say anything about it. So that's how I ended up having to go out into the world with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About just ballpark figure. About how many copies do you think you've sold? If you don't mind telling.
I mean, it was really small. I mean, I think I averaged about 10 or so per thing. So it was about probably a little less than 500 at that point.
Well,
I haven't looked of late because nobody really wanted to touch it virtually. I mean, I was pretty much responsible for everything that I sold because nobody would talk about it, So it's not like 50 Shades of Grey or whatever.
That's
where
did
people
you read that?
No.
That's a terrible book.
But yeah,
I actually have an analog to how what you've done with Koontown. If you look at all the backup CDs that I have for Discovery, my first book, I thought it was only going to be one book, and then it ended up being 3. But if you look at the backup discs for that book, you'll see it says N period, I period, S period, and a date.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine what NIS stands for? Given it stands for niggas in space, okay? But don't tell anybody that that's what I told you. And the reason why I changed it was twofold. One was it would be almost impossible to get a mainstream publisher to publish a book entitled that. And second of all, I knew that white folks would not be reading it on the bus or the train. And I wanted to get as many people to read it as possible. And the realities, as much as it's a great joke for me, there are certain marketing realities that I have to pay attention to, that I think that we all have to pay attention to. But your cover is fabulous, man. And for those people who want to take a look at it, it's at koontown.com, KOONTOWN.com. And I think that probably as you pick up more and more notoriety, obviously your back titles are going to sell better.
I would hope so.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me take this time to thank you very much. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for doing the show, man. You made it very easy, and you've got a whole lot of things to offer people. And we're going to keep track of you. We'll have you back later. And I for one am and I can't wait to see Mothership when it comes out, especially since it's coming out on my birthday. For those of you who are listening, either now or even as the podcast, remember to tell your friends that this broadcast goes live on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can do your own adjustments across the country. And to let people know so that they can check out the podcast later if they missed the show, we do love your support, and thanks for tuning in. And I can tell that our peerless leader is here to sign us off.
Thanks, William. As always, I want to continue to thank everyone that's participated on the show. I want to thank our guests for agreeing to come on and share what you're doing with us. Also, to please share your events on our calendar, as William stated before. I'll log in the site from time to time and see what other people are doing. It's a great wealth of talent and just great things going on the site. Make sure to please tell your friends and also to tune in each week. And I just want to continue to thank everybody for participating and for supporting what we're trying to do. So, with that said, I'm going to shut the show down, and we'll probably be in the chat room in a few moments. William, you have anything further?
No. Do you have a guest for next week lined up that you want to announce, or are we going to hold that back for a little bit?
Actually, next week we're going to have a movie makers roundtable.
Okay.
I think we have a couple confirmed people and a couple people that have been invited. Sonny is going to be back from one of our previous shows. Also, Kia Barbie has agreed to come on the show. She has put out a series called Evolve that everyone's talking about. Wolfgang has agreed to come on the show. And also this prolific writer, and he also has done a couple of short films, William Hayashi. He's going to be
he's going to be here? Oh, okay. I didn't even know he was going to be here. Yeah, I like him. And for those who are listening and those who pick it up later, that show is going to be a roundtable. We're going to have a discussion. And I would also like to have people be able to call in and chat with us and discuss the state of black science fiction films next week. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there. And for all the people at BSFS, all the people who make this show happen, I want to thank everybody for coming by. And we'll see you all next week.
All right. Good night.